Hey there, everyone, and welcome to Pour and Explore, a wine, food, and travel podcast. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, the wine guy. I'd love to be your go-to guide for all things wine, food, and the amazing places they take us. Here on Pour and Explore, we'll sip, savor, and wander through the exciting world of wine, discuss incredible cuisines, and uncover the stories behind unforgettable destinations. Each week, I'll bring you lively conversations with wine experts, chefs, travel pros, and fellow enthusiasts. We'll share practical tips, hilarious tales, and plenty of inspiration to fuel your next adventure. So grab a glass, pull up a chair, and join me as we pour, explore, and celebrate the good life. Let's dive in. Hey, all of you wine lovers, foodies, and flavor adventurers. Welcome back to Pour and Explore, the podcast where we sip, savor, and set out on delicious journeys across the globe. I'm your host, Nick Elliott, a certified sommelier, former winemaker, classically trained chef, and your guide to unlocking the mysteries of wine and food and travel, one glass at a time. Today, we're diving into something that seriously messes with your taste buds in the best way possible. I'm talking about umami. U-M-A-M-I, umami. That deep, savory, soul-hugging flavor that you just can't quite describe, but you know it when you taste it. If you've ever had a bite of food and a sip of wine that just stopped you in your tracks, you probably stumbled on a little bit of a flavor wormhole there. There's a good chance that umami was behind it. It's the magic in champagne and oysters, the earthiness between Pinot Noir and mushrooms. We're going to talk about those both in just a little while. The power couple of aged Parmesan and great red wines from Italy. Hopefully you're with me. Hopefully you're following on. Hopefully you're going to stick around for this episode because what is umami really? And what's happening on a chemical level when it comes to those pairings? What makes them click? And how can you start creating your own little flavor fireworks at home? Grab a glass, as always, get comfy, and let's explore. All right, so let's start at square one. What the hell is umami? You've probably heard it called the fifth taste, right? We all grow up learning about sweet, we learn about salty, we learn about sour, we learn about bitter. But umami is that deep, savory richness, and it literally translates to delicious taste in Japanese. And honestly, that is the perfect name. Umami shows up in foods that are rich in, we're going to get a little technical here for a second, rich in glutamates and nucleotides. These are naturally occurring amino acids and compounds that trigger a savory, mouth-coating sensation. You're going to find umami in Parmesan cheese, mushrooms, soy sauce, absolutely. Miso, most definitely. If you are a fan of aged beef at all, and a nice dry aged steak has tons and tons of umami, something that wasn't necessarily there before it went through the aging process. Tomatoes, especially roasted ones. If you're, again, a fan of Asian food, seaweed, nori, anchovies definitely have a lot of that flavor profile going on as well. And even breast milk. Breast milk has umami. I have not gone around and tasted that, not in a long time anyway, but that's what they tell me in culinary school. So we are definitely wired to love umami from birth. It's not spicy, it's not salty, it's that deep, satisfying richness, like when you taste a really good broth and it feels like it warms your soul. That, my friends, is umami. And here's a fun fact. Glutamates were first isolated in the early 1900s by a Japanese chemist who figured out that kombu, seaweed, had a flavor all its own. Mind-blowing. And that's how umami was born. So let's talk a little bit about the science behind what's going on in your taste buds. Let's geek out for a second, just a second. I promise light science heavy flavor. I don't like to go into too much craziness on the science side here, although I am a big science proponent. I'm not going to bore you with all of the technical names all of these things. Glutamates are found in protein-rich foods, and when those foods are cooked, aged, fermented, those glutamates become more concentrated. And that's why roasted mushrooms hit harder than raw ones. That's a great example. Another great example, aged Parmesan really slaps you in the face compared to the younger cheeses, even younger Parmesan. The proteins are breaking down and they release those glorious umami compounds. So aging certainly has a lot to do with that flavor profile. And the same deal is in wine, of course. Aged wine, especially the stuff that's been fermented or aged with lees contact, and I'm going to stop for just a second and explain to you what that means. LEES is the word that I'm talking about in winemaking. If the wine was allowed to age on the finished cells of the yeast that was used to ferment it, we call that lees contact. So if the wine that you are drinking had any type of lees contact, you are going to get some of that umami flavor profile. A great example of what I'm talking about is champagne or sparkling wine. These start to develop those umami characteristics because sparkling wine, champagne in particular, in particular wines that were made in the champenoise style, meaning that the wine was double fermented in the bottle on the yeast, that's going to have some really, really nice umami flavor. And, as far as flavors go, some of the things we're talking about are going to be flavor profiles and aroma profiles of brioche, like toasted bread, nutty depth, mushroomy, and even sometimes, don't get turned off, even sometimes hints of cured meats. Things like salami, prosciutto, things like that can definitely come from wines that were aged on lees contact. So something to think about next time you open a bottle of champagne. A really good champagne especially is going to be aged for years and years and years, and you're going to get a lot of those beautiful notes that I'm talking about in that wine. There are also some still wines, and this is dealer's choice, winemaker's choice, to age those wines in some way on the lees, and in those wines as well. Let's use Chardonnay as an example. You're going to get beautiful, toasty, nutty notes from a Chardonnay that was aged with the lees contact. It's a really, really nice way to go. I loved doing it as a winemaker, and it's something that you should definitely check out. So when you combine a wine that already has umami with a food that is umami rich, what you're doing is you're layering flavors on flavors. It's like stacking harmonies in music. Suddenly everything sounds, or in this case tastes, more beautiful and more complex. All right, let's get into the good stuff. We're going to talk a little bit about pairings now. When it comes to matching wines with food, umami-rich wines with umami-rich foods, or maybe not umami-rich wines with umami-rich foods, that is certainly a way to go as well. But we're going to specifically talk about some matchups that not only just work, they sing. They make you happy. They make your taste buds happy. There's just something about these matches that really, really set it over the edge and do such an amazing job when it comes to wine and food pairing. And we alluded to a couple up at the top of the show, and we're going to talk a little bit about those right now. Let's start off a little bit lighter. Let's start off with champagne or sparkling wine and oysters. Champagne is very high in acid most times. It is often, 99% of the time, aged on the lees, which gives the champagne a biscuity, savory backbone. I've opened bottles of champagne in the past that, literally hit me of rich baked cookies or a beautiful baguette that's just come out of the oven. Really, really amazing stuff. And if you can get a really good one, always smell your wine, people. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Always smell your wine. Oysters they're briny. They've got a minerality to them, and they are full of that oceanic umami. Together, you've got salt, you've got acid, and umami doing a three-part harmony on your palate. It's bright, it's bracing, and yet, in a lot of cases, depending on where you're getting your oysters from, can be creamy all at once. And bonus points, by the way, if you get a nice Brut Blanc de Blanc champagne or a champagne that is Chardonnay based, maybe a little Uni Blanc in there, etc., etc. The champagnes that are made strictly from white grapes really do take this pairing that I'm talking about to the next level. And so Blanc de Blanc, Blanc de Noir is the other side of that coin. And of course, that is going to be a champagne, sparkling wine that is made with both red and white grapes. For all the wine nerds out there. Anyway, speaking of wine nerds, I'm a Pinot lover. I love, love, love Pinot Noir. It's my go-to wine. Pretty much several nights a week, I'm cracking open a bottle of Pinot Noir. Whether it's from here in California, whether it is from my favorite region of Burgundy in France, beautiful Pinot Noirs coming out of South Africa, amazing Pinot Noirs coming out of New Zealand as well. And I'm actually planning a trip to New Zealand for next year, so make sure you keep your ears out for that one, because I'm going to let you all know about it, and maybe you can come along with me to New Zealand in 2026. But I digress. Pinot Noir and mushrooms. Pinot Noir and mushrooms is a match made in heaven. And this is my comfort zone. Pinot Noir, again, especially from Burgundy, or a couple places that I did not mention. Oregon, of course, is an amazing Pinot Noir producing area. The Sonoma Coast here in California, absolutely amazing. All of these wines from these particular areas have this earthy, forest floor characteristic to them. Think about, walking into the woods and smelling that fresh but earthy soil. I can't even explain it. That's why it's umami. Umami, umami, umami. That's how we're going to explain it. Mushrooms, portobello mushrooms, the chanterelles, the truffles, these are all kings of umami with that beautiful, beautiful foresty aroma and flavor profile to them. You take mushrooms and add a little Pinot Noir to that, and you're going to pair the two, and you've got elegance, you've got balance, you've got depth. A mushroom risotto, for example, with a glass, of nicely aged Pinot Noir, and maybe a 5, 6, 7, 8-year-old Pinot Noir. It's heaven. Absolutely. I'd write poetry about it if I wasn't too busy stuffing my face or recording podcast episodes. Anyway, let's move on to another one, and we're going to go a little Italian right now, and we're going to talk about Parmesan, particularly aged Parmesan, and Barolo. And this one's a showstopper. Barolo is high in acid, high in tannin. It's a wine made from Nebbiolo grapes, way up in the mountains in Italy, producing these beautiful grapes, high altitude in most cases. Really, really beautiful wine. I love Nebbiolo, by the way, and Barolo is just, the king of everything that is Nebbiolo. It can be fierce in its youth, but you give it time. You give a Barolo some time, and it softens into something really magical. They say Nebbiolo is the grape of tar and roses, and they're not kidding. You get a little bit of that tarriness. You get beautiful aromas of roses, and as it ages, you're going to get this really beautiful depth of leather and dried fruit in this wine. And of course, aged wines are going to have that beautiful umami characteristic to it. Now you take a beautiful glass of Barolo, and when we're talking about aged Barolo, we're probably talking somewhere in the 15 to 20 year range. Now, not everyone can get their hands on a 15 to 20-year-old Barolo. I wouldn't make this pairing with anything less than a 5-year-old Barolo. So, and I'm just spitballing here, people. So it's not necessarily a rule, but generally speaking, that is what we're talking about. Pair that with some aged Parmesan cheese, one that's been curing for 24, 36 months, and the salt and umami, they will smooth the tannins in that wine, and the wine's acid cuts through the fat in that cheese. Again, it is a match made in heaven. The cheese is going to melt in your mouth, and the wine blooms with flavor. It's bold, it's refined, and it's 100% unforgettable. What a great match. Love that one every day of the week if I could. My waistline would not like it that much, but my mouth absolutely would. All right. So what happens when umami goes wrong? It can. And what I mean by that, it's powerful. It's a powerful flavor profile. So it can also trip you up if you're not careful. So let's talk about some of the mistakes you want to avoid when it comes to making that perfect pairing with that umami flavor profile that we're talking about today. So mistake number one, using big tannic reds with umami bombs. Let's say you've got a big, bold Cabernet Sauvignon and you pair it with soy glazed tofu or miso soup. What's going to happen? That umami is going to intensify the tannins, and it's going to suddenly your cab is going to taste bitter and harsh. Not great. Not great. So I would avoid that. It's we talked about Barolo for a second a minute ago. That is going to be one that does have tannins. It does have that big acidity to it, but for some reason it's just a little bit different. I'm not big on umami with Cabernet Sauvignon. So if you are going for something a little more delicate, stick with Pinot, stick with Barolo, maybe not something as big and powerful as a Cab or like a Petite Syrah or something along those lines. Anyway, again, I digress. Mistake number two is using too delicate a wine with intense umami. Let's say you've got a dainty little Sauvignon Blanc and you served it with an aged blue cheese or an anchovy laced Caesar salad. Your wine's going to disappear. The wine that you're drinking with your salad or with the blue cheese is just not going to stand up. It gets overwhelmed, it gets flattened, and it totally gets outgunned. So I would highly recommend against doing something like that as well. So what's the fix? You want to go for high acid or already umami-rich wines. Aged reds, Lees aged whites. I mentioned Chardonnay earlier. There are beautiful Lees aged white wines from all over the world. So when you go into your wine shop and ask for something a little more creamy, a little something more texture, ask them about Lees aged white wines, and they're going to point you in the right direction. And of course, any of these wines, anything with texture and complexity, are going to handle the umami like a champ. Like a champ. All right, let's have some fun. Let's talk about with doing some pairings at home. Let's talk about, let's turn your kitchen into a little bit of a flavor lab. Maybe you're having a party coming up. having a dinner party or a group of friends coming over, this is going to be a super fun thing to do. Selfie ready, and let's get it on Insta and TikTok and all that good stuff. So here is how we're going to play this game. We are going to do a little wine and umami challenge. First thing you're going to want to do is you're going to choose an umami-rich food. I've already mentioned Parmesan cheese, prosciutto, soy sauce, mushrooms. Maybe you're going to get a little fancy and do a little tomato confit, something like that. If you don't know what that is, DM me. I'll be happy to tell you about it. And then you're going to pick 3 wines. You're going to bring home a Sauvignon Blanc, something crisp like a Sauvignon Blanc, or a Pinot Gris, Albarino from Spain, something along those lines. Something medium red like a Pinot Noir, a Chianti is another great example. Maybe a lighter Syrah, like a cool climate Syrah would be great with this as well. And then you're going to pick a big, bold red. I mentioned Cab, of course, earlier, a Petite Syrah, Petite Verdot, something along those lines. And then you're going to taste and you're going to compare. How does each wine feel, not taste, feel with the food? And I want you to use all of your senses. I want you to taste, I want you to smell, I want you to feel the feeling in your mouth, and just use all of your senses when it comes to doing this tasting. How does it feel with the food? Does it clash? Does it harmonize? Does it get richer? Does it make the wine more bitter? And as always, I love giving you a pro tip whenever you're out doing a food and wine tasting. If you're a nerd like me, take notes. You guys have seen my book all the time. Take notes about those wines that you are tasting. I keep my little book wherever I go. Of course, everyone's got their phone in their pocket. Get yourself one of those little apps, or just go in your notes app and take little notes about the flavors and the harmonies, or the lack of harmony, in those little things that you just tasted. So take notes, and that is going to help build your flavor memory bank. And make it a party, everybody. Invite some friends, set up stations, nerd out, make it a fun science project. So you'll learn a ton, and you will probably discover some killer new pairings that you didn't expect. So I think that would be a whole lot of fun. All right, and that, my flavor adventurers, is the scoop on umami, the 5th taste, the secret sauce, the flavored wizard behind so many of the best wine and food moments. We broke down the science for you a little bit, tasted through some epic pairings, gave you some tools to experiment at home. Make sure you're planning that party. You can reach out and invite me. I would love to come. Don't feel like it's necessary, but I would love an invite. And whether you are slurping the oysters, or shaving the truffles, or just roasting tomatoes on a Tuesday night, umami is your friend. Now listen, everybody, if you loved this episode, I would be stoked if you would leave me a review and hit that subscribe button. It really, really helps to spread the love and bring more flavored forward conversations to your ears. I want to take a little advertising break here for a second and remind you about this amazing trip that I've got coming up in November. We are going to be on a beautiful Alma Waterways boat, sailing from Basel, Switzerland, all the way up to Amsterdam. And we're going to have so many stops in between. It is a 10-day wine journey that you will never, ever forget. If you want more information, please reach out to me and let me know. It's going to be 10 days, November the 2nd through the 12th of November, 2025. I would love to have you on the boat. I'm going to be your personal wine host for 10 days, exploring the flavors of Northern Europe. Lots of Riesling, lots of Pinot Noir, and lots of fun, of course. All right, anyway, I'm going to put together a little bit of a freebie here for you, a wine and umami pairing cheat sheet that is going to be available for my listeners. Grab that by replying and commenting on this video, liking and subscribing, and just give me a big umami. So go ahead and put that in the comments for me if you'd like to get your hands on my free wine and umami pairing cheat sheet. Don't forget to slide into my DMs or tag me on social medias if you try your own umami tasting at home. Send me some pictures. Tag me. I want to see them and what you've come up with. Until next time, people, keep wondering and wandering, and cheers to you all. Have a great day.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Pour and Explore. I'd love to hear your thoughts, your stories, or your questions, so you can drop me a line at cheers@thewineguy.vin. That's cheers@thewineguy.vin. Or let's connect on TikTok, Instagram, or Facebook. Grab those links on my website at thewineguy.vin. Until next time, let's keep wondering and wandering. Cheers, everyone.